Well, welcome back, Campbell Dunlop. Uh, I spoke to Campbell a few weeks ago, and there's been a lot of interest. Campbell surprising me in what you've got to say. So thanks for coming back to us.
Morning, Hannes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, surprisingly, there was quite a lot of interest in that last interview. So there's still a bit to go ahead with, from sort of post army into Afghanistan and so on. But maybe we should cover a little bit about what happened to me in the last months of being in the army.
Campbell, before we get to that, as you know, a chap by the name of Jonathan Lane, I think was a trooper, RLI trooper, who was with your brother Craig when he was hit, sent us quite a detailed report, and very grateful to him because he pointed out events that I know you weren't aware of. So just talk us through what he did point out, picking up on where we were chatting about it last time.
No, for sure. And thank you to Jono. Obviously, we sort of lose our memories over exactly what happened, in the accounts that, we were told by Craig and so on. But basically, Jono clarified the situation. It was one commando in support of the two commando fire force operation down south of Fort Vic. They were dropped in, as a stop group. Gavin Wahlberg was the stick leader, Second Lieutenant Gavin Wahlberg, who was also a colleague of Craig's at Guinea Fowl. In fact, most of the stick was Guinea Fowl, except for Jono, who was a Falcon boy. Anyway, they got onto the ground and were maneuvering around a big sort of rock outcrop situation. Gavin Wahlberg went left, Jono and Craig went right, came around the other side, and that's when I think Craig got zapped by the insurgent, went down. Jono, got onto the radio, reported it to Gavin, but they didn't know where the shot had come from. Basically, it was so close, and so it was quite difficult. They sort of had to, lay low, etc. And then Gavin said to Jono to pull Craig, out of it. By this stage, Craig was lying, fairly close to Jono, but didn't look like he was breathing or anything. But Jono managed, to get across to Craig, and I think they were on quite a big slope, and managed to push him over, head first, and that got, out came a spurt of blood, etc., and that got him breathing again. At that point, Wahlberg actually took care of the insurgent, and rolled Craig down the hill, etc., and in came the Casevac helicopter with Major Webster, Cliff Webster, on the helicopter, and that whole Casevac system, went back to Fort Vic by chopper, DAC to New Serum, chopper back to Andrew Fleming, and into hospital. So, yeah, it was Jono actually who, more or less at one point saved Craig's life. But actually, in the article that Jono sent, he mentioned that as Craig went down, he told Jono to take cover, because he's been hit. So, to a certain extent, there was saving of both lives there in one way or the other.
Mm.
Yeah,
interesting.
And then
Craig's first reaction was concern for his colleague by his side.
Yeah. So that was thank you to Jono for clarifying that. Actually having been there.
Campbell, it just gets you thinking. I don't think we'd ever heard of body armor. If Craig had any protection at all, that shot wouldn't have penetrated as far as it did. But body armor was a luxury we were never exposed to at any level in the army.
No, I know, and I don't know actually whether the guys would have taken it, put it on, but because when we get to the part of Afghanistan, I mean, there's some shots that I sent to John, that shows you how the Americans are dressed for going into combat. So that's but you're quite right. If they'd had that gear on, he would have been okay.
Campbell,
I
know it's a bit of a touchy subject, but I'm pleased you agreed to tell us the story about how your military career ended, and it wasn't a glorious end. put it that way. But it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, thanks, Hannes. I suppose, look, you have to, to be honest about these things. I was disciplined for a weapon that went missing. I'm not going to go into the details, but I had to, serve some time in detention barracks.
So you were charged. Who did you go on orders before?
I actually went in front of a panel of Air Force officers, etc., with that issued the sentence. So yeah, I was sentenced.
What was the sentence?
It was actually, I was sentenced to 156 days in DB, okay, but 128 were suspended. I had to serve 28 days, which was obviously worrying. It was also embarrassing and not typical of Sergeant SAS. But anyway, as this is history. This is what took place. So I had to serve 28 days, and at that time I was sentenced to go and serve it in Bulawayo at Brady Barracks. And that, at the time, this is post-war, post-independence. This is when the whole army was integrating with the ZANLA combatants, and those barracks were full of ZANLA combatants, and the actual detention center was chocked with ex-ZANLA combatants that had obviously committed minor offences like assault and drunk on duty, etc. And so this was going to be difficult because I was just going to be the only white person and ex-Rhodesian soldier within those barracks, which wasn't a very nice thought. So somehow I managed. At the time, Dutch Herberts was our, I think, acting adjutant or adjutant at the time, at Kabul, and he managed to move me to the DB in Nkoma Barracks, where there was one white soldier still serving his time there. So that's where I had to go, and off I went. Delivered there, moved into a cell with the remaining white man that was still there, white soldier, and but it was his last day, which we didn't know. So ended up in a cell with him, but it was his last night. So the next day he was gone, and I remained on my own in that cell for a day or two. But getting familiar into the detention center setup, there was about 36 to 40 also, a mixture of I suppose Rhodesian Army, ZANLA combatants, and various within the box serving various sentences. The box was run by an ex Rhodesian sergeant, a black sergeant, and so basically on it went. But after a day or so, this one man approached me, one black inmate approached me. He was a very short, very stocky, light-skinned man, actually an ex-ZANLA combatant himself. And he brought me over to stand with him, sit with him in the sort of courtyard there, and said, what are you in for, and how long are you here, and so on. I told him, and he said, well, you just stick with me because I look after you here. The food wasn't very good. It was all getting delivered in big drums, and it was not that we couldn't take it, but he could see that I wasn't really eating very well. And he said, look, I'm going to organize you some food that will come from a kitchen, that from a sergeant's mess over there, because I know the driver. I've been here for a while, so I know the system. He said, you just stick with me and we'll sort this out. Even to the point where the sergeant came to instruct us for for PT and so on, and he said, we're going nowhere. This Marungu is with me, and you stay away from us. So he basically sort of quietly, these guys kind of took over. They weren't interested in being ordered around by somebody they'd been fighting against for the last how many years, 10, 12 years. But they weren't arrogant or anything like that. They were just quietly, confident that, they didn't need to, they were just there to serve time. They need to be left alone. So I sort of stuck with, and I called him Shorty, and I stuck with him. And the sergeant of the box said to me that you need to, you can't be on a cell on your own. You need to, integrate with the others in the box, which was also a bit worried. So of course, I went to Shorty and I said, look, this is what's going to take place. Can you bring yourself and, 4 others and come and join me in my cell. And he said, yeah, absolutely, we'll sort that out. So he did. And, all these other guys came into the cell. So it was a 6-man cell, and I was like on the top right-hand bunk. And, the other guys were, spread out, in the other bunks. Shorty actually just below me. It sounds weird, but you didn't really know, what could transpire. Not that it was too concerning, but anyway, so the first night we, lights are out, and they say to me, you need to, we were all, you were soldiers for the Rhodesian army, we were soldiers, for Zanla, and you need to tell us, what it was like and what you did and so on. And I said, well, I didn't really go into any combat. We were just new soldiers, busy training, etc. So they laughed at that, calling me a liar. But that was the fact. It was they could see maybe that I wasn't going to reveal. But anyway, they started to reveal, and it was one of the we never slept that night, actually. It was one of the most incredible evenings that took place because Shorty himself was a work on a farm in Karoi for an Afrikaans farmer. Okay, obviously didn't get treated very well. Moved through, I think, either Mozambique or Swaziland to Tanzania. From Tanzania, I remember, to Libya to Romania, and trained in Romania. Even up to parachute training. But his specialty was laying landmines in tar roads. The actual, procedure of, being able to do that without obviously being detected, and operated up in the Sipililo, Karuvi North area, and did a lot of work around there and survived the war. In fact, I suppose there was a lot of that sort of stuff that did take place up in those areas. And then the other two combatants were survivors of Opdingo. And the story that they were able to tell from their side as to, what happened that day. And obviously it's a long time ago now, but it was fascinating because they, as the description of the operation tells you in the books, etc., it was exactly like that with them. They didn't know what was coming. And the next thing, it was just chaos, explosions, etc. Now the one was hit in the shin, and the one, I think, took a calf wound down by the heel. The one man got away altogether, through the night or the day, in terms of what took place here. The other guy actually buried himself, okay, in like a little ravine, a little shallow ravine, and then covered himself with like leaves and brush and so on, and lay there for 3 days with this wound, and with soldiers everywhere, because it took a couple of days, before everybody was evacuated and left that at Chamoyo there. And some of the stories that they told around that, and it was a night of laughter, and them revealing their stories. Their whole point was to say is that although we were on opposite sides of the of the spectrum in the war, okay, it's finished now, and we were all soldiers doing what we were supposed to do, and we must rebuild this country and live together, side by side. So it was fascinating because you didn't, from our side, you never expected that, to hear that and actually be present amongst soldiers like this. And I suppose it resonates with what some of the interviews you've done, with Daryl and so on, talking to guys from the other side. So yeah, that was that was very interesting. But what so I was sort of 3, 4, 5, 6 days into the sentence, and the next thing, I think after about day 8 or 9, 10, okay, this Sabre Land Rover arrived with 2 guys in camouflage. Okay, it came up to the box. As I got closer, I could see that it was Tony Blythe and Stuart Cranswick, both from the squadron, and they marched into the box behind where the sergeant was there, and said, we're taking Dunlop today. And he said, no, you're not. He's still got another 20 days or whatever on his sentence. They said, no, we're taking him because we need to. He's got all his kit and his cupboards, etc. We need, if the unit is closing down, we need to take him. He needs to clear all this stuff, and we'll bring him back. So he started to argue about that, and I think it was Stuart who said, you're talking to an officer, so first of all, you better brace up, okay? And I'm giving you an instruction. This is what's going to take place. In the meantime, Tony was standing, and I came in. He said, "Go and get your kit, pack it all." So I rushed into my cell. The sausage bag, put all my kit in there. And by the time I got back to Tony, they'd sorted it out with the sergeant, and off I was, back into this Land Rover. I can't remember whether I had to sort of, get in the back and then later, get under a tarpaulin. And then, through the main and Como gates, okay, then get out and sit back in the Land Rover and back to Kabul. So basically, the guys came and did a little op there, sprung me from detention, and I back at Kabul under sort of I suppose house arrest there really. Well, couldn't leave the barracks, but spent the rest of the time training and until we closed down in December. But yeah, it's an interesting the part about those soldiers and how they they felt. They weren't arrogant or anything. They were just also very, very happy that the war was over, and that we should integrate and rebuild.
What a story, Campbell. Tell me, what was your daily regimen there? Was it quite physical? I know.
They wanted they wanted it to be. The son of the box wanted us to go to PT. Shorty said nobody's doing PT here. So don't even come near us. Okay, just leave us alone. Don't do your thing. We're here. So we would just sit around, okay, and tell stories and talk about the future and so on. It was amazing. They were quietly in control of the box as such. Yeah. And so yeah, we didn't have to do any of that. So basically, just sat around and between meals.
Campbell, just those last days in the SAS as it was closing down, just talk a bit about those last few months. I know there was quite a bit of division about who was going to go to South Africa and who was going to stay, but just talk us through those last months.
Yeah, for us it was in our intake and our course that had just been badged. We signed on. I remember telling you this in the last interview. We signed on for 3 years, okay, because the CO was planning operations and war, to carry on. Quite what those were, I'm not too sure. But so you had the option to leave and go to South Africa, or you could sign on and stay with with the unit in Zimbabwe, which is what we did. A lot of the older soldiers went to South Africa, and we know that there's a lot of that's documented, and a lot of our guys did go down and join the recce's. But I also I don't think that shaped out too well anyway. So it was left with basically our intake and a few of the older soldiers that came back and signed on, but not enough, Hannes. I think in the end, not enough soldiers to keep to warrant a unit or a regiment to continue as such. So it slowly kind of wound itself down. So, but we carried on training and went into all sorts of different training, like fighting in built-up areas, and kept busy doing that. Various survival courses we did conducting in the Zambezi Valley, etc. Moving around the country doing different signal courses, boat, etc. Yeah, and until it kind of sort of slowly went down to the closing down parade in December 1980. Yeah.
Campbell, here, I think I'm right in saying Mugabe actually didn't know about the SAS. He only found out about it later. He knew all about the Selous Scouts, but the SAS they didn't really know an awful lot about. So initially, the political feeling was quite neutral, whereas the Selous Scouts were taking a lot of heat, and they were under pressure to disband almost immediately. But I think also the British intervention, the British military presence in the country was a factor. And I think they were talking to the Zimbabwean politicians about, an integrated SAS and the SAS becoming part of the new order.
Yeah. Yeah, we weren't really privy to any of that, Hannes. I think you're right. I've sort of, heard a bit about that, but Yeah, and those other two, the Sleuth Scouts from the RLI were disbanded early on in the year, quite soon after independence, because of what you say, yeah.
So Campbell, fast forward, you back on the farm.
So left the army, went overseas on a trip, came back, started farming as a sort of an assistant manager. Then I went to Blackthornby, did a diploma there, went out and worked in Shambo next to Tug. On the whole Morkel sort of estate there. It was by then being split up with the three brothers. And did about 4 or 5 years there, then went back to the family farm and joined my father there, who had the family farm. We worked that for a bit and then bought the farm next door to the family farm was Beacon Hill. We bought the next door farm called Chiwarenza. And then, well, I got an AFC loan to do that. And then I, over the years, bought out my old man on Beacon Hill and, farmed those, through the sort of late 80s, 90s into, the first 2 years of 2000. But, that was developing irrigation, turning it from fully dry land farms into good, solid irrigation units. And then interfacing with the CFU, I would sit representing our district Shambo with the Cotton Council on the CFU, management meetings, chairman of the Farmers Association. So really got, involved at that level. And an interesting story is that we were doing a cotton AGM down in the Middle Sabi, where, every second year we would go down to Middle Sabi because there was a big cotton producing area. And this was in about 1995. We flew down there in 2 aeroplanes to do the meeting with our Middle Sabi counterparts, Stu Gunn and various. And when we'd had the sort of weekend with, golf and the normal sort of, drinking after the meetings and then time to fly back. 8 of us got on the one aircraft. They were both Cessna 402Bs, twin engines. And, attempted to take off for, back to Harare. And we crashed on takeoff with 8 of us on the airplane. Taking off.
Engine failure?
No, it was something went wrong. Something was not right with the one motor on the aircraft. But the pilot was very young, very new licensed, and under pressure to get back to Harare. Because in actual fact, he, Stu Gunn, I remember chatting to the pilot saying, whatever you do, take off towards the river, into the Sabi. And
which strip was this Middle Sabi you were taking off from?
Yeah, it was one on one of the farm strips. So it was, a fairly good strip, but, it was gravel and we were quite heavy, etc. Kit, golf bags, whatever. But the pilot, put it all on. And funny enough, I actually got on the aircraft and then got off because the people that were on the aircraft weren't going. Nobody was going from Charles Prince into Harare because I was off to stay with Craig. So I got off, and then Tony Gaskell got on, and he said, who was an experienced pilot himself, got on the plane and said, "I'll take you to Harare. So come, let's get on this airplane," because there was a later flight on the other aircraft. So we did get back on, and in the aircraft, was 2 of my next door neighbors. One was Don Fraser, who you may remember. Used to play rugby for Rhodesia back in the Steve Barton days. And the other one was Rob Parry, who was also a pilot, and he was sitting up front with the pilot. Don was sitting left opposite to me, and Tony Gaskell was sitting next to me. We were right at the back of the aircraft. Anyway, so, when you're on the airplane with these kind of pilots, you'd think, well, everything's okay. Anyway, off we trundled down the runway, and I started thinking to myself, we need to get up. Anyway, we got up, he retracted, and as we were kind of lifting up, the left wing went through the tree at the end of the runway. I mean, right outside the window here. So I thought, whoa. Anyway, it got through the tree. We were humming it. I mean, this thing's doing 180 knots. It kind of bucked a little bit, the plane, and then the left wing collected, those big power lines, the big sort of 11 kV, I think, power lines in the middle of Sabi. And it actually swung the aircraft vertically, into, heading for the ground, which the whole thing felt like it was in slow motion. But this took seconds, okay? And my last sight and thought, as I could see the field coming vertically through the cockpit, that's how vertically we were going down.
Yes.
And, I just put my head in my hands like this, and, excuse the language, I said, fuck, this is going to hurt. And we hit we hit the field. On hitting impact, I was kicked out of the aircraft, okay, and landed around about 10 to 14 meters away. This is, picking it up after the fact, and still in my seat, okay, with the aircraft behind me, still strapped in. So I basically landed in a cotton field. And I woke up, okay, and I wasn't like out for long, it was like minutes. And running towards me was Stu Gunn with a couple of, the wives of farmers in the middle. So being dazed, he came up to me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he said, "Look, I've got to carry on." And these other two girls came and unstrapped me. I had quite a gaping wound in my right knee. I had a wound in my head, and my ribs were broken on the left-hand side, and I had a bang on my hip. But at the time, I felt no pain. It was just shock, I guess. Anyway, got up. These people helped me up and walked. I turned around and saw the carnage behind me with this aircraft. I mean, all 5 people in front of us were dead.
Sure.
Tony Gaskell, managed to also get sort of kicked out, flopped out the side of the aircraft. He took such a major hit to his head. He wasn't dead, but he was in not good shape. Don Fraser actually walked out the best of us. He just had a hematoma on his one thigh and was kind of walking around. Anyway, we went, into the nearest farmers building and into the lounge, and these women started to sort of, apply first aid, etc. There's not much they could do. Laid on another the other aircraft was stripped of its seats to take Tony Gaskell to Mtali, where there was a doctor on standby there that was organized by Stu Gunn and his mom. And then Don Fraser and myself were flown in another smaller aircraft by one of the ag pilots down there. I think his name was Stu Kirkman, I think it was, and flew us up to Harare, which was another 2 hours in that aircraft. By then, the pain setting in, the shock setting in, and we were met, by CFU delegation, and then taken to the avenues. The avenues was full, couldn't get in, despite the fact that we were all life members, paid for beds, etc. And with ambulance to the Paranyatra, the old Andrew Fleming. Up, went into the emergency ward there and got seen to, and I was in hospital for 10 days while they assessed the situation. Tony Gaskell was in hospital, and to fast forward, Tony never really recovered. He, I think he's in an institution where people with his disability are functioning, and I understand that he does fine. We actually took the aircraft company to court and won the court case. De Bourbon was our advocate. We got a major settlement out of the aircraft company, but at the time, the currency was all going to the handbasket, and so that anyway, the payout went to to the widows of the 5 farmers that died. In fact, even the money that we were awarded, Don and I, we also gave that to the widows because obviously we'd survived and we were okay. Yeah, and that was that terrible incident, but unbelievable to survive that.
Campbell, so that was really a prelude to the countdown to the farm invasions in a way, I suppose. The threats started in 98, I think it was, about taking the land, and it wasn't soon after that it actually happened.
Yeah, it started in 99, with the sort of formation, as you say, 98 of the MDC, and that it was sort of coinciding with the referendum that Mugabe wanted to put forward, taking land and extending his time and power and so on, and that as that referendum didn't go well for him. And that that
was the
sparked
trigger.
off,
Yeah.
that sparked off the the land invasions, and we tried to resist that with with our labor, etc. That were they also weren't happy with that referendum. I guess they all voted no because it just meant that slowly they were gonna end up with no jobs. So it got quite hostile, in the districts, and they came in mobs to the gate, and said, this is you're out, we're in, basically. Very hostile. They had weapons. They were all, most of the time drunk or on drugs. And it was actually quite scary because there was no mechanism for defense. There was no police. There was nothing, that you could really do about it. It was so, well orchestrated politically that, we were on a hiding to nowhere. So I didn't want to put the family in any danger, because the kids were young and we couldn't defend ourselves. So I called the main guy in, and I sat him down in my office, which was down in the bottom end of the garden, etc., and negotiated. But this is post having to leave the farm so many times on the run from the military, and so on. And also, I guess we were targeted because we did work the MDC offices. I ran the sort of provincial office in Bandura, coordinating the whole of Mass Central, which was really a Zoni stronghold. And I mean, I've got some hectic stories there that of meetings and death and meeting MDC people at night. It was an incredible time, actually, learning and being involved in that. But anyway, I negotiated with this guy, and he gave us 7 days to get off. So we packed up everything within the security fence, all our animals, furniture, and we moved to town. That was it, really. I had to move my parents off, my managers, and so we moved to town and moved to the next stage, which was basically going to Zambia and trying to open up on the ZLT scheme there, which we did, and worked that from about 2002, 2003 through to 2006, 7. That was really good while it lasted, but it was very difficult. The loans were very tight. The payback periods were tight. ZLT was, in my opinion, I've still got a lot of mates at ZLT. We're quite harsh, okay, in some aspects. The pricing was tough. New farms, low yields, trying to learn the soils and so on. We put in a massive amount of investment.
Mm-hmm.
So we struggled, and eventually it didn't work out, Hannes. So we had to put that to bed and move on from there. I had 3 other partners in that: Bruce Chapman, Grant Patterson, and Colin Huddy. And regrettable, because it had potential, but just one of those that didn't come off. So then I got involved in a procurement business to the mines, procuring out of South Africa, going up to the mines and selling there. That went well for a while, and it eventually petered out. Leslie at that point joined me, and he was one of our sort of key salesmen up in Ndola, and he did actually very well to begin with, and then he had a terrible accident up there that he nearly died. So now we're getting towards 2009. And it's been through a divorce, unfortunately, but that we got through that, and then basically I'd run out of money, and appealed, to my ex-squadron mates like Tony in France, who were operating in Afghanistan, as close protection officers, basically bodyguards to American companies that were doing development work with the military there. So appealed to them. They did kindly. They managed to get me on a contract that was like in October 2009, and I went to on my way to Afghanistan. Had to stop in Dubai to stage to go in for this contract, and it was basically an election guarding ballot boxes for the Karzai election in what was that, 2009, end of 2009. Anyway, we got to Dubai, and we're milling around there for a couple of days, and the contract got cancelled. Not quite sure why, but it did. So I had to go back to South Africa, and I ended up getting a small contract with a big fiber optics company to go and put up cell phone towers in Zimbabwe. They needed a Zimbabwean guy, so I sort of fronted for them. Went up to Zim and worked for this organization for a while. And then Tony Blythe came back on leave in sort of November, December that year, and said to me that they were thinking of moving across to an agricultural project, okay, that had come up, financed through the US Embassy in Kabul. Big projects. They were, financed $300 million, etc., for, some sort of integration between the military and civilian to try and, help build the agricultural situation in the south of Afghanistan, in Helmand and Kandahar. So I put my CV forward, etc. He introduced me, via email to the guys that were recruiting, and I managed to get onto that contract, as did Tony and France. And the national fact at the time when we joined in there was quite a lot of us. I mean, there was Gary Lewis came over, there was France, there was Tony, there was Fanny Ferreira. Torty was up in Kabul at the time. I think Bruce Bargo was still up there. Or maybe they just left. So there's quite a few ex-squadron guys that were working in Afghanistan in security at the time. Anyway, we joined and we were deployed to Kabul I was in January 2010, and took up working for an organization called IRD, doing agricultural development work down in Kandahar. And you had to go and live on military bases and bind in with the military, and so fundamentally it started with cash for work, but it ended up where the military would go and destroy villages, okay, and we would come in and rebuild those villages in terms of replanting the vineyards, the pomegranates and wheat, etc., teaching farmers how to do this, supplying fertilizer, etc. So we lived on these military bases. Some of the guys were posted in Helmand, and I was posted in Kandahar, and it was rough. There was full on war going on between the sort of NATO alliance and the Taliban. So we had a compound in Kandahar. We had some staging compounds by the CAF airfield, and then we lived on these military bases, and we basically lived in containers. And we were self-organized, we were sort of self-sufficient with satellite dishes, our own generators, and we were given a slot on the base, and you had to kind of, fend for yourself. You could eat and shower and all of that with the military, but all your office and all your work, you had to take care of that yourself. So it's quite difficult because it's not, logistics, okay, in a place like that is, it's quite difficult because of distances. Being able to operate in a war zone, you'd be traveling with security and armored vehicles. You have to deliver things like generators, get them placed. You have to make contacts with the military in order to hook you into the system. So it was interesting times, and at the same time, face getting B7 or mortared RPG every other day. And learning to bind anything. We had to do patrols with the military in order to access our sort of farmers outside these secure bases. So it was interesting living on these bases. We saw an awful lot. I mean, like March 2012, our base got hit like 28 days out of 30 days, from the Taliban. This is incoming B7s. That would knock a container over, sort of just 3 or 4 containers away, which I saw, happen. We were operating in a tent. Our office was in a tent to begin with. And the tent next door, or the one just next door to that, also got a direct hit from a B7. So yeah, it was interesting times. I sent up quite a few photographs to John, but anyway,
and then by day was the idea to get out and help these guys farm.
Yes. So we try to sort out sort of agricultural centers where we became demonstration farms, a bit like art farm, but on a much obviously smaller scale. So you would set up a demonstration farm, you would conduct lessons to teach, grow stuff on these centers, and then go out into their farms and deploy that, that teaching, and try and get them to, to do it better than they were doing. We did a lot of work with canals, refurbishing canals, etc., but a very, very antiquated basic farming systems, Hannes, and very poor soils, very little rain. So it was very tough conditions, but also hostile. So, you were not dealing with farmers that were, completely on side, that it was just they were just taking whatever they could get from our system, and they were still harboring the Taliban and so on. But we used to see, massive battles going on. You could literally stand on the roof in these bases and watch full-on war going on outside. So that was the south, and then we had a compound in Kandahar, and that got smoked in about 2012 as well, where it was a 30 villa a compound where, when you would come in from the military bases, and that's where you could catch up on admin and sort out, sort of documentation, etc., for continuing to operate on the bases. So it was like an admin center, and I suppose a little bit of R&R from the military bases, But that compound got hit as well with most of the people. I was actually on my military base at the time when it took place, but Jerry Webster, who we all know very well, we shared a room, and he was present. That so like John Harrell was present as well, and a few others. Anyway, our compound was next door to the UN compound, and the Taliban drove quite a big sort of truck through the UN gate and up against our compound wall, and blew 800 kilos of explosive, on a suicide bomb attack. And it just blew every window and door, out of our villa. This was at 6 o'clock in the morning. And interestingly, John Harrell had just got up. John was an ex-chopper tech in the war. Also a guinea fowl guy. He just got up to make coffee, got out of bed to make coffee when the explosion hit. And a piece of glass in the shape of like an arrow actually was embedded in his pillow where he had actually just got up from. Had he been there, that would have gone straight into his head. Anyway, so what ensued then was everybody obviously has to get into safe rooms, and a 6-hour battle ensued with 7 Taliban and our security personnel that were made up of, ex-British military, American military, and I think there were around about, I actually sent the picture to John, I think there were six or seven of them, of our guys, plus some Afghan, guys to fill in. Well, of course, the Afghan security guys ran, and it was left to us 6 guys to fight the 6 or 7 Taliban, which they did. But it went on for 6 hours. But they killed, all the Taliban. And eventually the American military came around and said, what's going on here? They didn't even know we were living there. So that's where we got ambushed a few times on the road. I actually was with Fani on a trip back to my base when we got ambushed on the road. But, we were in protected vehicles, etc., and got through it. I think he got hit a couple of times in his base. So it was interesting. But, also, we were paid well, Hannes, so it kind of helped, rebuild finances and so on. But they were tough rotations because you would, do 9-10 weeks in and sort of 2 weeks out. But I did that right up until, I did that for 6 or 7 years, 6 years, I think. But in my last 2 years, I moved to Kabul and was based there running, quite a big staff and doing, running projects remotely out of Kabul. And there we lived in a very well secured hotel complex called the Baron Hotel. But it also got bad in Kabul. The insurgency started to kind of get closer into Kabul, and that got hot as well. I remember driving down one of the main roads there with Afghan soldiers and strung up to the lampposts, being hung and naked. We got, I think, I'm not even sure if Stan Standish was there, operating with Heart Security, where they got hit on the way out from the hotel very badly. And I think that was probably the end of their contract because they lost, I don't know how many people died in that, security guards, but a lot of people were wounded. I'm sure he was there at the time. Anyway, so it got hot there. And so I decided to leave, because I think we had one explosion in Kabul that, landed quite close to the hotel. That was, I don't know what it was. I think it was a stray bomb, but it was so bad. I mean, the crater that it developed and the amount of people it killed, so close to the hotel, I started to get worried. So, your time's up really. And so I left Afghanistan and went to Southeast Asia to a contract in Myanmar, which was obviously, it wasn't a war zone, but it was still, viewed as pretty bad from terms of the sort of American U.S. embassy side. So, the contracts were good, the pay was good. So
what were you actually tasked to do there, Campbell?
Same thing. Our projects were based around, supporting the value chains of different commodities. So, like in Myanmar, I went into the sesame value chain and the melon value chain. Being on the Chinese border, whatever you grew in Myanmar, the Chinese would buy. So I was responsible for developing those value chains and improving the farmers, well-being on their farms, being able to teach them how to, to basically grow these things in a better environment, with different fertilizer regimes, different agricultural, tillage practices, and so on. And then, from the marketing side of it, I actually did some time in China, talking to the traders on the other side of the border to help our Myanmar farmers. And that went extremely well. We managed to really streamline the trade between Myanmar and China and help the farmers with payments, increase prices. We were delivering 1 million tons of melons to China out of Myanmar on very bad roads and so on. It was an incredible achievement, actually, because that's a lot of stuff. And the same with sesame. We actually developed the value chains to be able to export into Japan and into the European Union. Very high grade sesame seed, black sesame, or black and white. But basically the farmers were by default, organically growing it. So there were no pesticides involved. So it was a very highly sought after product and massively used in Japan. And being able to trade with Japan is always a good thing, because it's, the prices are very good. So I managed to get lots of good contracts for these farmers, okay, in Japan and China, and be able to improve those value chains. So
Campbell,
did that for 2 years.
Just explain the political backdrop in Myanmar at the time, with the generals and what was the security threat, the state of the country?
It was fairly quiet while I was there. She was
Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yeah, Aung San Suu Kyi was basically in government, okay, but her hands were tied, because it was still, the percentages in parliament were still controlled by the Myanmar, military. But there was no sort of hostilities, in the south of Myanmar, but up in the northeast, northwest, okay, is where the trouble started with the Muslim groups up, up on that side by Sitiwe, just across the way from Bangladesh, and that that developed while we were there. Yeah, very bad. I mean, the Myanmar military were very intolerant of the Muslim faith, and basically wanted to just get rid of, that whole population then, and send them back to Bangladesh. And so that, that was a problem, but it was sort of out of the way. And we weren't operating in those areas and didn't really, feel it practically on the ground. But then, of course, Myanmar is now, turned for the worse. And I suppose it just, I've still got colleagues there and talk to them. They still work on these, these aid projects and so on, but it's a different landscape, isn't it?
Campbell, just going back to Afghanistan, bit of a tough question maybe, but your take. Well, firstly, how did you get on with the Americans? Were you on the same?
Very well, actually, very well. We basically were slotted in with the higher ranking stuff, so we would have direct access to the commanders of those bases. Now, on my base, we rotated through the 101st Airborne, the 82nd, and the 10th Mountain. The 10th Mountain division were the guys that were in Black Hawk Down. all three of those colonels were, I had, full access to, and, they were great. They were very nice to deal with, and, up from the lieutenant colonels to the colonel majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels. Very, very, very interesting. I mean, we were playing poker in one of the tents one evening on the base, and two of the guys were military guys, ex-Marines. Well, they were ex-military, and they were all Marines, and they said to me, "So where are you from?" I said, "Well, originally Rhodesia." And they said, "What?" They were still trained, okay, on Op Dingo. Op Dingo was part of the Marine training manual on the most successful camp attack ever. And this guy telling me, he said, "We were trained on this Op Dingo." He said, "Were you in it?" I said, "No. But it's a well-documented operation." So that was quite interesting. And look, the whole thing about Afghanistan to me was that it was a lost leader. I don't think anybody expected that it would all come right in Afghanistan. I think the Americans used it as a training arena, and also securing two very big air bases, in Asia, which they couldn't do anywhere else. I think Pakistan was more the threat than anything else. That was an unknown to them. And Pakistan did disrupt Afghanistan, the whole time. So I think a lot of it was an amazing training ground. I mean, the things we saw, from artillery to jets to drones, was incredible, actually. So yeah, and then I suppose the quid pro quo was, the Afghan government saying to the Americans that you need to do agricultural development if we are going to allow you, to have your military and your, and take on these bases. So I think that's how it kind of worked politically. But we left. We all know what's happened to Afghanistan. There was no meaningful sort of progress. The whole Taliban army and stuff was financed through the production of opium, through the poppies.
That's what's always struck me about this whole thing. We hear so much about the American declared war on drugs, but then they actually occupy Afghanistan, and there's more opium coming out of Afghanistan under American occupation than there was before they went there.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes you think they were involved in, some of the export of that, but that's a bit of a stretch. But yeah, I mean, it was in the beginning, okay, quite a lot of the poppy hectarage was obliterated, but it just came back again, and it became more and more difficult to take hold of that, especially down in the Helmand province. And I think it was losing its momentum. It was costing lives, it was costing money, and nobody really had that. No, nobody has in Afghanistan. The Russian, whoever's gone in there has been, has never really achieved anything. So, and it's I think it just needs to be left to the Afghans. It's not a place that it's very, very difficult to operate there. It's a desert itself.
Campbell, did you have anything to do with the British military there?
No, but Tony and France and those guys, Gary, they all operated down in Helmand where the Brits were stationed, and some of them would have been on those British bases. I basically was just with the American, full-time army, not the Marines either. It was quite difficult living on an American Marine base. It was very rustic, put it that way. Yeah. So the Brits only operated down in Helmand, and either Tony or France or Fani, those guys would have been on those Brit bases. Yeah.
Campbell, if nothing else, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, so it's ended up here, and I did some time in Somaliland, teaching there as well, and then came over to Jersey to run the medical cannabis project that we're on now. That's about to go to listing. So it has. We've been around and about, and it just shows you what you have to do to survive. After losing everything back in Zim. Yeah.
Campbell, last question. If you had a chance, would you go back to Zim if you got your farm back?
It's an interesting question. I think the place is so broken now, Hannes, that to fire up those farms to the extent that would be viable with the irrigation, you would have to fire up all that power again. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that it would be. We're getting on now in age. My children are all basically set up here in the UK and Singapore and so on, and on yachts and so on. So I don't know. You would, if they wanted it, there might be a way. But so many years out of it to go and reestablish that, where would the money come from? Would you be able to, to get the right labor force together? Lots of unknowns, but risky.
Yeah, you're probably right. The damage is too severe to be repaired.
I think the guys that have maintained farming there, like Stuart Reeds and so on, that's okay. They've managed that well. And when you're in the system and you've been there, you can, you know how to manage that. To come in raw now, I don't think that's clever. Yeah. Yeah.
Campbell, thanks, my friend. All I can do is wish you every success with this venture. You deserve a break, my friend, and I hope it all goes your way.
Yeah.
You make lots and lots of money.
Thank you, Hannes. It's been a journey, but thank you very much, and all the best to you, and we'll keep in touch.
All right, my boy. Stay well.
Yeah. Thanks, Hannes. Bye.
Cheers, Campbell.